At the time of writing, Return to Silent Hill, the much anticipated adaptation of Silent Hill 2, has a 29% audience score on Rotten Tomatoes and an even lower critic score of 16%. It is no secret that the general consensus is that this is an awful movie that deviates heavily from the source material and completely alienates the fan base it is desperately trying to appease. Speaking of fans, hi. My name is Pathetic Ivy. Statistically speaking, you're here because you know me for really liking Jeff the Killer or for covering an extensive amount of mascot horror content. But I've also made it no secret that I am a pretty big Silent Hill fan and care very deeply about this franchise. Silent Hill 2 stands as my sixth favourite game of all time, and as you can then guess, is a game I love to pieces. I have spent a huge chunk of my time playing through that game and analysing every detail of its beautifully haunting story. So, most people would assume that I would not enjoy Return to Silent Hill as one of these die-hard fans. Those people would be incorrect. I genuinely think this film is pretty damn good, and I want this video to serve as my defense of it. So please, sit down and let me tell you just why I am the one guy who liked Return to Silent Hill. Spoilers ahead, obviously. First, I'll talk about probably the less argued things with this movie. First of all, the set design is genuinely fantastic. The location of Silent Hill looks genuinely perfect in my opinion. The outside locations are beautiful with the tall buildings and iconic looming fog creating a fantastic air of mystery. The pale whiteness that falls onto everything in frame just sets that cold vibe that Silent Hill should have. Secondly, Hannah Emily Anderson's performance as Maria is by far my favourite performance in the movie. She very perfectly blends the two fairly different interpretations of her from the original Silent Hill 2 and its remake into the young, lively, and often flirty but very emotionally dependent character that she is supposed to be. I will admit her character is a lot shallower in this movie, an issue with all the side characters in this film, but I'll get into that later. And you don't see the complexities of her psyche that the games show, but for the purpose she is supposed to serve in the story of this movie, she is a fantastic part and a great interpretation of one of my favourite characters of all time. But now that I've mentioned the story, I suppose I need to address that. Obviously, the most important part of any film, but also the most controversial thing about this film. For those who don't know, Silent Hill 2 is a story about James Sunderland receiving a letter from his wife, Mary, who died 3 years ago from illness. The letter telling him that she is waiting for him in Silent Hill. I will keep the plot description brief and try my hardest not to ramble, but it is integral to this video that people understand what makes Silent Hill 2's story so special. Throughout the game, you find a wide variety of people and monsters that are all created by Silent Hill to reflect James's trauma and psyche in an attempt to torment him, eventually leading to the realization that James had actually killed Mary in cold blood no more than 3 days ago, due to the overwhelming pressure of having to take care of her while she was terribly ill, and that he had repressed all these memories and entered a dreamlike mental state, painting an incredible moral grey around James, as people still argue to this day about if he is a redeemable person, with some people saying that he was a good person who loved Mary deeply and primarily killed her as a form of mercy to stop her suffering, while many others see him as a completely selfish and cruel person who killed her purely to allow himself to be free of the burden that James saw her as. Needless to say, it's an incredibly emotionally powerful story. So, with all that in mind, Return to Silent Hill changes things drastically and opts for a much more intense story that is absolutely still emotional but a lot less morally ambiguous and just much more depressing. This is not to say that I think the story of Return to Silent Hill is better than that of Silent Hill 2. Like, no, it is objectively worse. But worse and bad are two very different things, and I won't lie, when I sat in the cinema and the movie took heavy deviations from the game, I was worried I wouldn't like it. But as it went on, I really appreciated the movie for what it is. First thing you'll notice is that James Sunderland is an extremely different person. He is a lot more angry and emotionally unstable than the cold, trauma-riddled, disassociated James we are used to, but I think it works brilliantly for this take, as the movie puts a lot more emphasis on the relationship between James and Mary, with a lot of flashbacks of them together. Which leads to the next major difference. In these flashbacks, we learn that Mary was raised in Silent Hill and the daughter of the leader of the cult that secretly runs Silent Hill. It is also revealed that Mary was physically, emotionally, and sexually abused by both her father and the members of the cult after his passing, which contextualizes Mary's illness as something that the cult caused due to the disgusting stuff the cult would force Mary to eat and drink when she was younger. I genuinely find this take on Mary extremely interesting, as it ties her back to the cult that is wholly missing from Silent Hill 2, although being a key part of Silent Hill 1 and 3. But it also adds another layer of tragedy to the story, both for the previously mentioned details, but also in this we are shown that James and Mary first meet when they bump into each other, which leads Mary to miss her bus out of town, implying that if Mary never met James, then she would have ran away and escaped the awful people of Silent Hill. The actual journey James takes, however, remains fairly similar, just sped up to fit into a movie's runtime. And I will use this time now to say that the movie is genuinely effective at being scary. I was a bit worried with this film being rated at 15 that it would pull some punches, but generally speaking it doesn't feel that way. But now I do have to bring up that although I've already praised the set design, the CGI for the actual monsters is not great and generally doesn't feel like they're in the same room as the actors, because the lighting over the monsters frequently does not match the lighting in the environment. There is one exception to this though, and that is Pyramid Head. He's just such a presence in every scene he's in. He genuinely looks fantastic, and the way he moves makes it look like every single action is causing him immense pain. Incredible take on the character. Okay, now before we go on to the ending, I just want to quick fire a few things I wanted to say but couldn't fit anywhere else. Eddie, Angela, and Laura are side characters. In the original game, it is left ambiguous whether they were actually real or just hallucinations created by Silent Hill. In this movie, it is made abundantly clear that they are hallucinations and represent pieces of James' psyche, but what they represent are fairly different to the games. Eddie is a representation of the mess of a person James became after losing Mary, while Angela represents the abuse that Mary faced from her father, and Laura is still the annoying little shit we're all used to. The only one who really gets their conclusion, though, is Angela, where you get to see the disgusting depiction of her father make an appearance. We do not see Eddie going crazy or Laura's story of her time in the hospital with Mary like we do in the games, obviously cut due to them representing vastly different things in the movie than the game. Finally, the cinematography in this movie is genuinely fantastic. The way everything is shot and the frequent use of Dutch angles alongside scenes that look like they're shot from first person just gives this film such a fantastic style, and I love it so much for that. The movie ends with James reaching the roof of the Lakeview Hotel and confronting a distorted version of Mary's body, leading us into one final flashback of Mary at the absolute worst of her illness, James trying his best to take care of her. During this scene, Mary tells James not to feel any guilt for her being this way. She still would have gotten ill whether he made her miss that bus or not. James just made her happy even though she was sick. Then, Mary makes one final request for James to end her pain. And after some back and forth about it, James begins to suffocate her with a cloth. We come back to the present with James leaving the hotel with Mary's body. He puts it in the back seat of his car and James begins to drive into the lake in front of him. As the car plunges into water, one last scene plays. It initially seems like a repeat of the opening scene where James and Mary first meet, but things play out slightly differently to the point where the audience realizes that this isn't James's first time going through these events, but still chooses to make the same decisions that cause Mary to miss her bus, leaving the audience with the morally ambiguous fact that despite what it led to for both Mary and James, James would do it all over again. Roll credits. In conclusion, I think people as a collective need to stop hating on adaptations of certain material just for differing from that source material. Don't get me wrong, there are times where it is warranted, but what sets Return to Silent Hill aside from things like the Netflix Death Note movie is that this movie is genuinely beautifully crafted with the spirit of Silent Hill kept in mind every step of the way. And I hope that this analysis is proof of that. Silent Hill 2, the game, already exists and will always be a masterpiece, and personally, I would rather get a 7 or 8 out of 10 adaptation that tries to reinvent itself and breathe new life into the concept, than just have the same thing I've already seen in a different format. It's why franchises like James Bond have gone on as long as they have, because with each remake and reboot they reinvent themselves and don't just try to do GoldenEye over and over again. I think that Return to Silent Hill is an incredible alternative take to the themes and ideas that Silent Hill 2 presented 25 years ago. That while it doesn't hold a candle to the original, is fantastic in its own right. And on that note, I've been Pathetic Ivy, and I bid you farewell.